She pressed a silver blade to my throat and said, "Tell me where the vampire is." I smiled. "You're looking at him." She didn't believe me. Nobody ever does. That's the thing about living 847 years. You get good at looking harmless. My name is Adrian Voss, and yes, I am a vampire. Not the dramatic kind. No cape, no coffin, boring somewhere around century 3. And I just signed a contract with the one woman whose entire job description is to kill me. Her name is Mara Kane. 6 feet of bad decisions and a crossbow she clearly loves more than people. The contract was simple. I needed a hunter to protect my estate. She needed the money badly. Neither of us asked too many questions. That was 2 weeks ago. Right now she has a blade in my throat, in my own kitchen. And I am trying very, very hard not to laugh at how this all played out. Let me back up, because 847 years is a long time to be alive. And this story deserves a proper start. I've seen plagues, wars, 3 completely different versions of Times Square, and the rise of frosted tips. Through all of it, I kept exactly one rule. Stay invisible. Don't get attached. Don't get noticed. Simple, clean, effective. And then the Vampire Council showed up and ruined absolutely everything. The council, imagine 12 very old, very dramatic people who take themselves painfully seriously. They wear ceremonial robes. They use words like decree unironically. One of them still writes with a quill. I had been successfully avoiding them for centuries. Then 3 months ago, a letter arrived. An actual letter, on black parchment, sealed in wax, hand-delivered at 3 in the morning by a very nervous courier. "Adrian Voss, you are hereby summoned to answer for your crimes against vampire society." Crimes. As if paying taxes on time and not murdering anyone is somehow deeply offensive to these people. I crumpled the letter and made espresso. They sent another one the next day, then another after that. By letter 7, delivered through a window I was certain was locked, I started to think they were serious. Here is the thing about the council. They have their own hunters, vampires who track down other vampires. If they send their hunters after you, you have maybe 72 hours before things get catastrophically ugly. I needed protection. Specifically, I needed a hunter good enough to make even council trackers hesitate. There is exactly one name that operates at that level in this city. Mara Kane. I found her file through channels. 43 confirmed vampire eliminations on record. 0 casualties on her side. Usually working completely alone. One client review read, Mara arrived 40 minutes late, broke 2 of my windows, killed the target with a soup ladle. The review continued. Then she sent me a bill for the ladle. I paid it immediately. 5 stars, no hesitation. I knew right then, this was my person. I arranged a meeting at a coffee shop downtown that same afternoon. She walked in 8 minutes late, sat across from me without saying hello, and started reading the contract mid-sentence. Dark hair pulled back like it personally annoyed her. A scar along her jaw that looked like a story I wasn't invited to hear. She read every single line, turned each page slowly, like she was expecting to find a trap buried somewhere inside. She probably was. Hunters always expect traps. It's what keeps them alive longer than the average person in their line of work. Protection detail, she said finally, setting the last page down flat. 30 days, full payment upfront, no exceptions. Correct, I said. She didn't look up. What exactly are we protecting this property from? She asked. I paused for exactly 1 second too long. She noticed it immediately. Of course she noticed. She notices everything. Rival business interests, I said, keeping my voice perfectly even and my expression perfectly human. She looked up from the contract then, really looked at me. That measuring look, like she was building a file behind her eyes. I have had centuries to perfect a convincing human expression. I gave her my absolute best one right then. She held the look for 3 more seconds, then went back to the contract, picked up a pen, and signed it. "One condition," she said, sliding the contract back across the table toward me without looking up again. "I find anything on this property that violates my personal code of conduct, the contract is immediately void, and I walk." "Reasonable," I said. She left without finishing her coffee. I sat there for a moment after she was gone, deeply aware that I had just hired the most dangerous woman in this city to protect me from my own kind, from vampires. Essentially, I had hired a vampire hunter to protect me from vampires, from what I am. The irony was not lost on me. If anything, it was sitting across from me drinking the coffee she had left behind. The estate is old. I bought it in 1987 when the neighborhood was quiet and nobody asked inconvenient questions. 14 rooms, a wine cellar that contains no wine whatsoever, and a basement I told Mara was storage for old furniture. It is not storage for old furniture, not even close, but that was a conversation for another day. Hopefully never. Day 1. She walked every single room of the property with the focused energy of someone being paid very well. She measured sight lines with her eyes, tested every lock, checked every window frame for weaknesses in the seal. She found 3 entry points I had completely forgotten existed. I had owned this building for 37 years. She located vulnerabilities I had missed in under 40 minutes. I was simultaneously impressed and deeply unsettled. "You live here alone?" she asked, not looking at me, running her fingers along the basement door frame carefully. "No staff, no guests coming and going, just you rattling around in 14 rooms by yourself," she said flatly. She turned and gave me that look again, that calculating look that felt like she was running numbers I couldn't see. "You're not afraid," she said. It came out more like an observation than a question, and it caught me slightly off guard. "Of what?" I asked. She kept her eyes steady on mine. "Of whatever is coming for you. Most clients are terrified by the time someone calls me," she said. "They're usually a complete wreck. You look like you're waiting for a bus." I considered how to answer that for a moment longer than I probably should have. The pause was noticeable. She let it sit. "I've had enough time to make a certain kind of peace with it," I said finally, and that was entirely true. She held eye contact for one more second, then went back to examining the door frame like the conversation hadn't happened. "Peace with it, sure. 8 centuries of existence, and the thing that finally gets me is paperwork and one woman with a crossbow. Day 3, she found my food supply, not the blood. I keep that extremely carefully hidden behind a false wall. The other thing, the East Pantry shelf. 60 bottles of hot sauce arranged by country of origin. 12 types of instant noodles. A thick notebook filled with handwritten ramen recipes dating back to 1987, organized by season and broth base. She stood there staring at the shelf for a noticeably long time before she said anything at all to me. "You collect hot sauce," she said. Not a question. More like she was reading evidence at a crime scene. "I have a very organized system," I said. She picked up a bottle, read the label carefully. Then another. Then another. "South Korea, Mexico City, and this one," she squinted at the label, "is from a Louisiana town I'm not sure exists anymore. I travel frequently," I said. She set the bottle back in its exact spot. She didn't say anything else about it, but when she walked past me into the hallway, I caught something briefly on her face before she turned away. Not suspicion. Not the hunter's calculating look she wore most of the time when she looked at me. Something softer than both of those. Something that looked, just for a second, like genuine curiosity about me. I filed that moment away carefully and went to make coffee, which is what I do when I don't know what else to do. Day 5. The council sent their first scout to remind me that they had not forgotten about me or my situation. I felt him before I saw him. There was a specific pressure in the air when another vampire is somewhere nearby. It was 2 in the morning. Mara was running her perimeter check outside on the south side of the property. The scout came over the east wall smooth, completely silent. He had about for seconds before Mara came around the corner. I moved faster than I have needed to move in a very long time. Crossed the courtyard in well under a second. Had him by the collar and against the stone wall before he even fully registered that something had happened to him. "Telvos, the council is running out of patience," he said quietly, his voice completely steady despite the situation. I knocked him out, dropped him back over the opposite wall, and was standing in the kitchen pouring water before Mara turned the corner. She stopped at the courtyard entrance, looked at the space carefully, then looked directly at me standing in the kitchen light. "I heard something out there," she said. Her voice was perfectly flat and completely unconvinced by whatever I was about to say. "The neighbor's cat," I said. "Gets over the wall sometimes. Completely harmless. Happens pretty regularly actually." She looked at the courtyard one more time with eyes that were running their own separate investigation on everything they saw. She absolutely did not believe it was a cat. Not even slightly. But she went back to her perimeter rounds without another word. That was too close. Uncomfortably. Dangerously close. And it was only day 5 of a 30-day contract. The problem with Marcane, I was beginning to understand, is that she does not miss a single thing. Not one. By day 6, I had assembled a mental list of everything she had quietly cataloged about me, without saying a word. The fact that I had never once eaten anything in front of her during 6 full days of sharing the same living space. The fact that my skin temperature ran consistently about 4 degrees colder than any normal living human being should. The fact that I own books in 7 different languages on shelves she had initially assumed were purely decorative choices. And the fact that every single mirror in the entire house had been turned to face a wall. Everyone, without exception. That last one was a habit from 1987 that I had simply never corrected, because I stopped noticing it myself somewhere along the way. "Superstition?" she asked one morning, stopping in the hallway and nodding at an upturned mirror leaning against the baseboard. An interior design phase 1 deeply regret, I said, with as much casual conviction as I could reasonably manufacture. She looked at me, then at the mirror, then back at me with an expression that stored everything and gave nothing back. She said absolutely nothing. And when Marcane says nothing, it lands louder than most people shouting directly at you. Day 8 brought the second scout, and this one arrived with considerably less subtlety than the first had managed. He came through the north window at 3 in the morning and burned a council seal directly into the window frame. In vampire political language, a burned seal has one specific meaning. The next visit will not be a social call. I stood in the dark hallway looking at the mark with the particular feeling of a problem that is finished being avoidable. What is that? Mara's voice came from directly behind me, and I had not heard her approach, which was itself remarkable. She was standing in the hallway in full tactical gear, crossbow already raised and aimed, studying the burn mark on the frame. Her eyes moved slowly from the mark on the frame to my face, and stayed there for a long and very deliberate moment. Rival business interests, she said. The exact words I had used at the coffee shop on the day we met. Said back to me flat. That is a burn pattern I have seen before, she continued, her voice completely steady. On vampire crime scenes specifically. The word hung in the air between us like something with weight. I did not move. I did not change my expression. Who are you? She said. Actually, not the version you gave me at the coffee shop. The real one. Right now, someone who needed protection. I said carefully. The contract is valid. Payment cleared. Nothing has technically changed. She stared at me for a full 3 seconds. Then the crossbow came up to full draw, aimed directly at the center of my chest. Show me your hands, she said. I showed her my hands. She looked at them the way she looked at everything, building a case. You have been cold since day 1, she said, not breaking eye contact. You have never eaten in front of me once. You don't sleep at hours that make any sense for a human being living on a normal human schedule. She continued evenly. You have a basement you have given me every possible reason to avoid inspecting, and I let that go longer than I should have. And your eyes in low light, she said, taking one slow step forward. They catch the light differently than they should. I have eliminated 43 vampires, Mara said. I know precisely what I am looking at right now. So, the silver-tipped bolt was aimed at my chest from close range. At this distance, if she fired, I had maybe 6 seconds. Tell me where the vampire is, she said. I looked at her for one moment, then I smiled, because there was nothing else to do. You're looking at him, I said. The silence that followed was one of the more remarkable silences of my very long life. She did not lower the crossbow. She also, critically, did not fire it. At this specific moment, that meant everything. You hired me, she said slowly, working through it out loud. A vampire hunter, to protect you. From something. Yes, I said. From other vampires, I said. She let another silence sit between us before she spoke again. That is completely insane, she said finally. It is not my finest strategic moment. No, I agreed. But here we are. Why would other vampires be coming after you specifically? She asked. Her voice had shifted. Still hard, but listening now. The council has developed serious concerns about my lifestyle choices over the past centuries. I said carefully. I pay taxes. I don't kill people. I have filed as a human citizen for 200 years. To them, I am an embarrassment. The crossbow dropped 2 inches, maybe 3. Her eyes didn't change, but something behind them shifted slightly. You're telling me, Mara said, that the vampire government wants you dead because you are too law-abiding to suit them. When you phrase it that way, it sounds almost funny. I said, it is absolutely not funny. She replied immediately. No, I agreed. It really genuinely isn't. She held the look for a long moment. Then the crossbow came all the way down. She set it against the wall, walked to the kitchen, sat at the table, put her face in both hands without another word. I stood in the hallway for a moment. Then I followed her and put the kettle on. Because you make tea. That's what you do. I should terminate the contract, she said, still talking into her hands. You could, I said. That is entirely your right. My personal code of conduct is very clear on this, she said. I don't protect vampires. I eliminate them. That's the job. I understand that completely, I said. So why am I still sitting here in your kitchen? She said, mostly to herself. The kettle finished. I made 2 cups and set one in front of her without asking. She looked at it for a long second. Do you actually drink tea? She said. I have been drinking tea since before it was fashionable anywhere in Europe, I said. She picked up a cup, held it. If I stay, she said, the terms of this contract change significantly. Right now, name them, I said. Full disclosure, she said. Everything, the basement, the council, every single thing you've kept back. Agreed, I said without hesitating. And if I find out you have lied about anything at all, she started. The contract is void, and you walk, I said. Your original condition. I remember every word of it. She looked at me. You're really 847 years old, she said. Not a question anymore. Just a fact she was placing somewhere in her mind. 847. I said. 848 this coming March, if everything goes reasonably well, and you collect 60 bottles of hot sauce, she said. I contain considerable multitudes, I said. The corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile exactly. Something smaller and less certain than a smile. But it was there, close enough that I noticed it. And I have been alive long enough to know what it means when you start noticing things like that. It means you are already breaking rules. Rules I had maintained carefully for 8 full centuries without slipping once. Stay invisible. Don't get attached. Don't let anyone get close enough to notice the things that give you away. I had already failed 2 of those completely. The third one was beginning to look like wishful thinking at best. The basement conversation happened the next morning with full morning light coming through the high narrow windows. I unlocked the door, walked her down the stone stairs, and she was completely quiet the entire way down. With Mara, quiet means she is absorbing everything. Stone walls, low ceiling, a specific kind of light bulb that took me nearly a decade to track down and source properly. Against the far wall, the archive. Floor-to-ceiling shelving that covers every inch of available wall space. 8 centuries of documentation, journals, photographs, documents in a dozen languages from a dozen different countries across 800 years of a single life. Mara walked to the shelves and stopped in front of them for a moment before she reached out and picked up a photograph. Black and white, New York City, 1923. She looked at it for a long time before she said anything to me about it. This is you, she said finally. Yes, I said. This is you in 1923, she said. I age on the slower end, I said. She set it down carefully. Picked up another. London, 1887. Then one more. Tokyo, 1956. She went through them quietly. Then her hand found the journals. She picked one up, read the date printed on the cover, and set it back down very slowly. Like the thing in her hands had suddenly revealed itself to be something entirely different from what she had assumed it was. The date on the cover of the journal was 1340. She turned around and looked at me standing behind her in the archive room. You were alive during the Black Death, she said. Her voice was different when she said it, quieter than usual. I lost people during the time, I said. Friends, the humankind, the kind that don't come back and can't be replaced. Something moved across her face when I said that. Something that didn't fit neatly into the hunter's expression she usually wore. She turned back to the shelves, stood quietly for a moment with her back to me before she spoke again. You said you haven't killed anyone, she said. Not in for centuries. I said. What changed for centuries ago? She said. A fair question. A genuinely hard one that I had not answered out loud to anyone in a very long time. I decided to see how long I could maintain it. I said. It started as something closer to an experiment than a commitment. Then it became a habit, I said. And then somewhere along the way it became the only part of myself I was still proud of. The basement was completely quiet after I said that. Mara stood with her back to me for a long moment. Then she turned. I need a full briefing on the council, she said. Everything you know, tonight. I'll make more tea, I said. And I want to properly inspect everything behind that east shelf before we do anything else, she said without softening it. There is a section back there you are genuinely not going to enjoy seeing, I said. Why? She said. Text documents, I said. 800 years of them, completely unorganized, going back to before filing systems existed in any recognizable form. She looked at me with an expression I was beginning to recognize as the one she wore when I surprised her against her will. You have filed taxes for 800 years, she said. 200, I said. They didn't have income tax before that, right? She said. Of course they didn't. She turned and walked toward the east shelf and I followed a step behind her. Somewhere between the overfilled 1987 cabinet and a folder labeled in my own handwriting as miscellaneous 1800s. Mara Kane made a sound small quiet. Almost nothing, but it was the sound of someone very close to actually laughing. I had not made another person laugh in a genuinely long time. I had forgotten entirely how much it changes a room. That was the exact moment I understood I was in real trouble. Not the council kind of trouble, not the elimination team kind. The other kind entirely. The kind that 847 years of careful invisible living had absolutely not prepared me for in any way. The third scout arrived later that same night, and this one was nothing like the first two had been. Not even slightly. No warning, no pressure in the air before he arrived. He was older than the others. Much older. The kind of vampire who has spent centuries learning to arrive without being felt or heard at all. He came down through the basement ceiling, dropped directly into the archive room while Mara and I were still working through documents spread across the floor between us. He was fast, in a way that centuries of practice produces. Mara was faster in a way that I genuinely had not expected from a human being. In 3 seconds flat, she had the crossbow up and a silver bolt through his right shoulder before he finished landing. He hit the shelving hard. Photographs and journals scattered across the stone floor in every direction around him. He was bleeding dark, almost black, the color that blood turns after enough centuries have moved through a body. He looked at me, then at Mara standing with the crossbow still raised and steady, then back at me with something like disbelief. "You hired a hunter," he said, the way someone says something they consider to be a profound personal violation. "I did," I said. "The council will not accept this arrangement," he said. "The council can get in line," I said. He pulled the bolt from his shoulder, an experience I will spare you the specific details of, and threw it at the floor between us. "Elimination team deploys in 48 hours, Voss. There is nothing standing in that room that changes what is coming for you." He was gone before I could respond to that. Back through the ceiling, the same entry point he had dropped through. Mara stood with the crossbow still raised and held perfectly level. She lowered it slowly, looked at the dark stain on the floor. 48 hours, she said. Not a question, just a number she was placing somewhere useful inside her mind. "Yes," I said. "Elimination team is for the 6 vampires, you said. All older than you, specifically trained for exactly this kind of situation." "That is correct," I said. She picked the bolt up off the floor, examined the dark stain on the silver tip carefully. "He was old," she said. "The color of the blood, that indicates significant age. Approximately 600 years, I said. "And the ones coming will be older than him," she said. "The majority of them." "Yes," I said. She set the bolt on the table. She turned and looked at me with a directness that I had stopped being surprised by because it was simply how she operated. "Why does the council actually want you dead?" she said. "The real reason, not the diplomatic version you've been giving me." I looked at her for a moment before answering. "Because I remember what we were before the council existed," I said. "Because roughly 200 years ago I wrote a thorough and well-researched document that said exactly that out loud. And unfortunately for me," I said, "that document survived every attempt to make it disappear over the full centuries." She stared at me in the particular way she had when she was recalibrating something important. "You wrote a research paper," she said. "A fairly comprehensive critical analysis of their foundational mythology," I said. "It was extensively cited at the time, and they want to kill you for it," she said. "Academic disagreement escalates on a very different timeline," I said, "when everyone involved is functionally immortal." She sat down, picked up a cold cup of tea that had been sitting on the work table, looked at it without drinking it. 48 hours, she said again, quietly, working through what that number actually meant against what we had available to us. "To prepare for 6 vampires who are all older than you, using whatever is currently inside this building." "Yes," I said, "and whatever I brought with me when I moved in," she said, "which is considerably more than it probably looked like." I said nothing. She looked at me with an expression that was entirely new. Not the hunter look, not the calculating look she wore most of the time. Something that looked like decision. Like someone who had just finished weighing something difficult and come down clearly on one side. "Good," she said, "because I brought a lot, and for the first time in a genuinely long time, I believe the next 48 hours might not end the way the council was planning on them ending." Marcane had that effect on the situation. On a room, on a person who had completely stopped expecting to be surprised. 847 years, and I had not seen her coming. I probably should have, but I am glad, deeply, unexpectedly glad, that I didn't. Team Adrian or Team Mara? Drop it in the comments. And if you think she's already figured out more than she's letting on, you're probably right. The next 48 hours started at midnight with Marcane spreading a hand-drawn map across my kitchen table like she owned the place. She had been in my estate for 9 days and she already moved through it, like she had lived here for years. That was unsettling. "Entry points," she said, tapping the map. "I've identified 11. You seal 3 after day 1. 8 remain exploitable." 8, I repeated. She looked up at me with the expression she reserved for things she found professionally unacceptable for a vampire who has owned this building for 37 years. "Your security awareness is genuinely disappointing," she said. I had nothing useful to say to that. She was completely right and we both knew it. So I just poured more tea and stayed quiet. "The council team will split," she said, pulling a pencil from behind her ear. 2 on the roof, 2 at ground entry, 2 in reserve. "That is a reasonable tactical assumption," I said. She did not look up from the map. "It's not an assumption. It's a pattern. I've studied 11 council elimination operations going back 40 years," she said. "They don't deviate. It's a pride thing. That surprised me enough that I set my cup down. You've been studying council operations, I said. She finally looked up. I've been studying you since the day you walked into the coffee shop, she said. The council file came up on day 2. The room went very quiet after she said that. I looked at her across the kitchen table with a genuinely new understanding of the situation. You knew, I said, not accusingly, just placing the facts somewhere. I had strong suspicions, she said. Now I have confirmation. And you signed the contract anyway, I said. She picked up the pencil again and went back to the map without missing a beat. The contract was legitimate, she said. The money cleared, and whoever is coming through the window is a bigger problem than you are. I sat down across from her and looked at the map she had drawn from memory. Every room, every corridor, every weak point marked clearly. She had done this in her head over 9 days of walking the property and acting like she was just doing routine perimeter work. What else did the council file say? I said. She was quiet for a moment, pencil moving across the map in small deliberate marks. It said you were the oldest living vampire not affiliated with any governing body in the known world, she said without looking up. It said the document you wrote 200 years ago has been copied and distributed to 17 underground vampire networks. And it said the council has sent elimination teams after you for times before this one, she said. All for failed to return. I looked at my tea. That is technically accurate, I said. She looked up. You killed for council elimination teams, she said. They gave me very little choice in the matter, I said. Each time they came, I tried to resolve it through conversation first. How did that go? She said. Poorly, I said. Conversation is not the council's preferred resolution method, it turns out. She held my gaze for a moment. Then the corner of her mouth did the thing again. Not quite a smile. Close enough to notice. So we have 46 hours, she said, going back to the map. And I need to know exactly what you can do in a fight. That was a reasonable question, one I had been expecting since the moment she found out what I was. I took a breath and answered honestly. Speed that would look unreasonable to you even now that you know what I am, I said. Strength in the same category. I can sense other vampires within roughly 30 meters under normal conditions, I said. Further, if I'm concentrating specifically on it, I don't require sleep in the way you do, I said. I can operate at full capacity for 6 to 8 days without any rest at all. And the things that actually hurt you, she said. She had her pencil ready. She was going to write this down. Of course she was. Silver, I said. Significant exposure. A gray slows me. Sustained contact is a real problem that compounds over time. Direct sunlight for extended periods, I said. Not the movie version. I won't burst into flame, but it drains me significantly. And decapitation, I said, which I mentioned only for completeness. That one applies fairly universally across most living things. She wrote all of it down in the margin of the map in handwriting so small and precise it looked almost like a printed font. The team coming, she said. They'll have silver. Guaranteed. Yes, I said. Standard council field equipment includes silver blades. Hollow point silver rounds for the ones who carry firearms, I said, which is most of them in the past century or so. She nodded like this was exactly what she had already assumed. She pulled a flat case from under the table and set it between us. She opened it. Inside, arranged in foam cutouts with surgical precision, were more weapons than I had expected to see in one place. Silver-edged blades in 3 sizes, modified rounds in a matte case marked with her own shorthand. To compact crossbows, several devices I didn't immediately recognize. UV emitters, she said, noticing where my eyes had landed. High intensity, close range, disorienting rather than lethal for your kind. Useful for creating distance, I said. She nodded. Exactly. I don't need to kill them. I need to slow them down long enough. Long enough for what? I said. She looked at me with that steady look that had stopped surprising me and started meaning something else entirely. Long enough for you to finish it, she said simply. You've done this for times before. You know how it ends. I'm the distraction. I looked at her across the table. In 847 years, I had met a great many tactically gifted people. Most of them were primarily concerned with their own survival when things became genuinely dangerous. It was a reasonable concern. Mark Hain had just volunteered to be the distraction in a fight against 6 ancient vampires. Without hesitation, without negotiation. You don't have to be here when they come, I said. The contract doesn't require you to fight a full council elimination team. She looked at me like I had said something in a language she did not speak and had no particular interest in learning. The contract requires me to protect this property and its occupant, she said. That's what I'm going to do. Stop being strange about it. I stopped being strange about it. She went back to the map. I watched her work and felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not gratitude exactly, Something more complicated than gratitude. Something that 8 centuries of careful distance had kept very far away. We spent the next 6 hours preparing the estate together. She directed and I executed, because her spatial instincts were simply better than mine. Silver filament strung across 3 of the 8 remaining entry points at ankle height in the dark. Nearly invisible, genuinely effective. UV emitters mounted above the 2 primary ground floor entry points, angled to catch anyone coming through at full speed from outside. The basement archive sealed and reinforced from the inside with 2 layers of barricade. That would take serious sustained effort to breach. You care about what's down there, she said while we worked, not stopping or looking up from what she was doing with the barricade. 800 years of documentation, I said. It's not replaceable. She worked in silence for a moment after that. The journals from the 1400s, she said. The ones from the Black Death period. Are those the ones you meant earlier? Yes, I said. She nodded slowly, said nothing else. But her hands were more careful with the barricade after that, which I noticed. By 4 in the morning the estate felt different, tighter, more deliberate, like it had finally decided to take itself seriously. Mara stood in the center of the main hall and turned slowly, checking sight lines, checking angles, checking everything one more time. Get some rest, she said without looking at me. I'll take first watch. I told you, I don't require rest away. I started. I know what you told me, she said. Sit down. Give your system whatever version of rest it accepts. You'll need to be sharp tonight. I sat down in the chair nearest the kitchen doorway because it was the most defensible position in the room and she had already thought of that. She walked to the window, stood there in the dark looking out at the street with that still, patient quality she had when she was waiting. I watched her for a moment. 8 centuries, and I had never once had someone stand watch for me while I rested. Not once. Mara, I said. She didn't turn around. What? She said. I tried to find the right words and came up short, which almost never happens to me. Thank you, I said, which was inadequate. She was quiet for a moment. Don't thank me, she said. I'm still billing you for this. The corner of my mouth moved. I settled back in the chair and closed my eyes and listened to the building settle around me. Outside, the city moved through its ordinary nighttime rhythms. Traffic. Wind. The distant sound of someone's music from a window above. Inside, Marcane stood at the window in the dark with a crossbow resting against her shoulder, watching everything at once. And for the first time in 847 years, staying in one place did not feel like a temporary arrangement. I did not examine that feeling too carefully. I had learned enough about myself to know that examining certain feelings too carefully was dangerous. The council team arrived 31 hours later. Not 48, 31, which told me 2 things immediately upon feeling them approach. First, the scout I had thrown over the wall had reported back with more information than I had accounted for. They adjusted their timeline accordingly. Second, and more concerning, they had sent 7, not 6. 7 vampires, which in council deployment terms meant they were not taking chances this time. Mara was in the east corridor when I felt them. I moved to her and under 2 seconds. She already had the crossbow up when I arrived. I feel for on the roof, I said quietly. 2 at the east ground entry. 1 I can't place yet. He's masking himself somehow. She absorbed this without any visible change in her expression or her breathing. The 1 you can't place is the problem, she said. Yes, I said. He is old enough to control his presence deliberately. I haven't encountered that level in about 2 centuries. She looked at me for 1 second. How old is old enough to do that? She said. Older than me, I said, significantly. Something moved in her face. Not fear exactly. More like a very precise recalibration of what the next hour was going to require from her. The UV emitters go on when the east entry breaches, she said, confirming the plan we had built together over the past 30 hours. I take the roof team's entry point in the north hall, I said. You hold the east ground entry with the emitters and silver rounds, and the 1 I can't place, I said. Watch for anything that doesn't move the way it should. Anything that arrives without sound. She nodded once. Then she looked at me with that direct look that had stopped being intimidating somewhere around day 4 and become something else. Don't die, she said. It came out shorter and more direct than either of us had probably intended it to, and sat in the air between us. That is my strong preference as well, I said. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. Then she turned and moved into position. The next 11 minutes were the loudest 11 minutes this estate had experienced in the entire 37 years I had owned it. The east entry came down first, exactly as she had planned. The UV emitters fired and the first vampires through the door staggered hard. Mara was already moving. Silver rounds in a pattern that was less shooting and more architecture. She was building walls with bullets, forcing them back toward the entry, keeping them in the emitter range where they were slow and she was not. It was remarkable to watch. I did not watch for long. The north hall ceiling came down in 3 places at once, which meant the roof team was better coordinated than average. 4 of them, moving fast. The oldest one hit the floor and had his bearings in under a second, which told me everything about his experience level. He looked across the hall and found me standing in the doorway and stopped. Vampires of genuine age recognize each other on instinct. Voss, he said, not aggressively, almost with something like tired recognition. You've made this very complicated this time. I generally try to, I said. Then I moved, because conversation with a council enforcer is a delay tactic and I was done being delayed. What followed is difficult to describe with any precision because at this speed that very old vampires operate, individual moments compress. 3 of the 4 went down in the north hall, silver from my own kit, which Mara had quietly added to my jacket pocket at some point during preparation. I had not noticed her do it. I noticed it now, which was almost funny given the circumstances I was currently operating in. The 4th, the oldest one, the one with the tired eyes, was faster than the others in a way that reflected genuine centuries of practice. We moved through the north hall and into the corridor, and I was aware the whole time of Mara's fight, happening 30 meters away. I could hear it, the precise economy of it, the way she moved through a dangerous situation with complete absence of wasted motion. The old enforcer heard it too. He glanced toward the east corridor for half a second. That half second was the only one I needed. It ended in the corridor. I will leave it at that. 8 Centuries teaches you that some moments do not require detailed narration. I moved to the east corridor. The 2 ground floor vampires were down. Mara was standing in the center of the room breathing hard. She had a silver blade in her left hand that she had not started the fight with, which meant she had taken it from someone during the fight. She looked at me when I appeared in the doorway, ran a quick visual check across me the way she did, looking for damage, cataloging. 4 on your end, she said. 2 on mine. She was doing math. Her eyes moved. That's 6, she said. You said 7. Yes, I said. We both went still at exactly the same moment, because we had both arrived at the same conclusion simultaneously. The one I couldn't place. The old one. The one masking his presence well enough that even I had lost him in the approach. He had not come in with a team. He had let the team go first. He had waited, which meant he was not here to eliminate me. He was here to observe, to assess, to bring back information about what had just happened and why a council team had failed again. Mara moved first. Basement, she said. I was already moving. We hit the basement stairs at the same moment from different directions. The archive room was intact. The barricade was untouched, but the far corner of the room held a presence I could feel clearly now. He stepped out of the shadow in the corner without any urgency. Older than the enforcer in the hall, older than almost anything I had met. He was not in council robes. He wore a plain dark coat and carried nothing visible. He looked at me with eyes that had seen everything. Adrian Voss, he said. His voice was the kind of quiet that fills a room completely. I am not here to fight you tonight. Mara had the crossbow up. He glanced at her with what might have been genuine appreciation for the accuracy of her aim. You hired a hunter, he said, the same way the scout had said it, but where the scout had said it with offense, this one said it with interest. I did, I said. He looked at Mara for a long moment, then back at me. The council will want to know why, he said. The council can ask me directly, I said. I have been available for the conversation for centuries. They keep sending teams instead. He was quiet. In the basement with the archive behind him and 8 centuries of my life on the shelves around us. The document you wrote, he said finally. 200 years ago. I have read it. I said nothing. It was accurate, he said. That was not something I had expected to hear from anyone connected to the council in any capacity in the centuries. Mara held the crossbow steady. She said nothing. She understood that what was happening in this room right now was not her scene to enter. What is your name? I said. He looked at me with those ancient tired eyes. Corvus, he said. I was on the first council. Before the robes. I looked at him. Before the robes meant before the council had become the council. Before the politics and the ceremonies and the decrees. Before my time, even. And I am very old. What do you want? I said. He looked around the basement. At the shelves. At the journals. The same thing you want, he said quietly. To see if there's a version of this that doesn't end with everyone destroying everyone. The room was completely quiet. Mara lowered the crossbow 2 inches. Just 2. But I noticed it. She had made an assessment. That is a longer conversation than tonight allows for, I said. Corvus nodded slowly. I will be in touch, he said. Through channels. Not black parchment, I said. Something moved in his face. The closest thing to a smile I suspected it ever produced. Not black parchment, he said. And then the presence in the corner of the room was simply gone. No movement. No sound. Just gone. Mara stood in the center of the archive room for a moment. crossbow lowered fully now, looking at the empty corner. That, she said, was not in the briefing. No, I said, it was not. She looked at me. Is he going to be a problem? I genuinely don't know, I said, which is the most interesting answer I've had to the question in about centuries. She looked at the empty corner one more time. Then she looked at me with that look that had been evolving slowly for 9 days. I need coffee, she said. It's for in the morning. I'll make it, I said. We walked up the stairs and into the kitchen. The estate was quiet around us. Whatever the council had sent was gone. The immediate threat had passed, at least for now. Mara sat at the table. I made coffee. The map she had drawn was still spread across the surface between the cups and the pencil. 847 years old, and I was standing in my own kitchen at 4 in the morning making coffee for a vampire hunter. Life, I have found, has an extraordinary sense of humor when you give it enough time to develop a proper punchline. What happens now? She said. I set the cup in front of her, sat down across the map, looked at her in the kitchen light. Now, I said, we wait to hear from someone who was old before the council existed, who may or may not want to end a 4th-century war. She looked at her coffee and the contract. She said, 30 days. We're at 9. I looked at her. She looked at the map. The threat has changed, I said carefully. The terms of the original contract don't quite cover what this has become. She picked up the pencil, turned it over in her fingers once, set it down. No, she said, they don't cover it at all. We sat with that for a moment. The kitchen was warm. Outside, the city was doing its 4 a.m. version of quietly existing. I'll need to renegotiate, she said finally. I looked at her. What are your terms? I said. She picked up the coffee. Full disclosure going forward, she said. Everything you know about Corvus. Everything you know about the document. All of it. Agreed, I said. And I stay in the East Room, she said. Through whatever this becomes next. She did not look up when she said it. I looked at her across the kitchen table at 4 in the morning with an empty map between us and a very old problem becoming something new. Agreed, I said again. She drank her coffee. I drank my tea. The estate settled quietly around us into its ordinary nighttime sounds. And I thought about 847 years of staying invisible, staying unattached, staying carefully and deliberately alone. Then I thought about the fact that she had put silver in my jacket pocket without telling me, during preparation, without being asked. And I decided not to examine it too carefully. For now, some things deserve a little more time before you look directly at them. Something big is coming in part 3. Drop a comment. Do you trust Corvus? Because Adrian might be starting to. That's either very smart or very dangerous. Corvus made contact on day 12. Not through a letter, not through a scout, through a phone call at 7 in the morning. I did not know he had my number. I did not know he knew what a phone was. Both of those assumptions turned out to be incorrect. Voss, he said when I answered. His voice sounded exactly the same through a phone as it had in my basement. Completely unhurried. Corvus, I said. Mara was across the kitchen table with her coffee cup halfway to her mouth, watching me with full attention. There will be a meeting, he said. 3 days from now. Neutral location. You, me, and the council representatives I have selected personally. Selected personally, I said, meaning they are not the standard variety of council representative. I said. Correct, he said. Meaning they are council members who share your concerns about the current direction of vampire governance. I said. Silence. You are perceptive for someone who has spent for centuries deliberately avoiding politics, he said. I had good reasons, I said. You still do, he said. Which is why this meeting matters. 3 days. I will send the location through channels. He ended the call. I set the phone down. Mara set her coffee down. We looked at each other across the kitchen table in the morning light. He wants a meeting, I said. I heard, she said. 3 days. Neutral location. To council representatives he chose himself, which means there is a faction inside the council that does not agree with the elimination policy, she said. I nodded. Or it means there is a faction inside the council that wants something from me specifically, and has decided this is the cleaner way to get it. She picked her coffee back up. Both of those can be true at the same time, she said. Yes, I said. That is what concerns me. She was quiet for a moment. You're going, she said. Not a question. Yes, I said. She looked at her cup. So, am I, she said. I looked at her. The meeting is for vampires, I said carefully. The meeting is about your survival, she said. I'm going. I did not argue, partly because arguing with Mara Kane on a matter she had already decided was a documented waste of time, and partly because the honest answer was that I did not want to walk into a room of ancient vampires without her in it. That was a new feeling. I noted it carefully and set it aside and went to make more tea, which was becoming a pattern. The next 3 days were quiet in a way that felt deliberate. No scouts, No burned seals. No pressure in the arid odd hours. Either the council had pulled back to let the meeting happen cleanly, or they were repositioning for something larger than a team. Mara thought it was the second one. She spent those 3 days rearranging the estate's defenses on the assumption that she was right. I thought she was probably right too, which made the quiet feel less like peace and more like a held breath waiting to release. On day 2 of waiting, something happened that I had not planned for and could not have predicted even with 8 centuries of experience. It started with rain. The specific kind of heavy evening rain that makes the city go quiet and turns every window into a mirror. Mara was in the archive room. I found her sitting on the floor with a journal open across her knees and the 1923 photograph beside her. She looked up when I came in. She did not close the journal or move the photograph, which meant she had decided I was allowed to see this. "You were in Newark in 1923, she said. "Yes," I said. I sat down on the floor across from her, back against the opposite shelf. "During Prohibition," she said. "Yes," I said. "Were you involved in any of that?" she said. "Define involved," I said. The corner of her mouth moved. "The journal from that year," she said. "You wrote about someone named Eleanor." She said it carefully. I looked at the photograph in her hand. In it, I was standing on a street corner in winter light looking at something off frame. "Eleanor was a journalist," I said. "She was investigating a story about disappearances in Lower Manhattan." Mara waited. "Some of the disappearances were mine to explain," I said. "Vampires I had located and removed before they became a public problem." "Removed," Mara said. "The permanent kind of removed," I said. She nodded. "She found out what you were," Mara said. "Yes," I said. "What happened?" she said. I looked at the photograph for a moment. "She wrote the story anyway," I said. "About the disappearances?" She left out the part about what I was, I said. "She told me it was because the story was more important than the explanation." Mara was quiet. "You stayed in contact with her," she said. "It was not really a question." "For 11 years," I said. "Until she died." The archive room was very quiet with rain against the high windows and 8 centuries of documentation on the shelves around us. "Is that why you stopped?" Mara said. "Stop what?" I said, though I knew what she meant. "Getting close to people," she said. I looked at the metal distance between us and thought about how to answer that honestly, without making it into something dramatic. "It was one of the reasons," I said. "The main one was simpler. People and I don't. The math on that gets difficult over time." She looked at the journal in her lap. "That sounds very lonely," she said. "Not with pity, just as a straightforward observation." 8 centuries of evidence supports the conclusion," I said. She looked up. There was something in her eyes I had not seen before. Not the hunter look, not the calculating look, not even the almost smile look. Something more direct than any of those. "You know what's interesting?" she said. "What?" I said. She held up the journal. "You kept all of it, every single year. You kept it." I looked at the shelves around us. All of it, every name, every year, every person who had passed through 8 centuries of a life I was not supposed to be living. "Throwing things away seemed final," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she set the journal carefully back on the shelf. She stood up. I stood up. We were close in the narrow space between the shelves in a way that the room had not arranged before. She looked at me with that direct look. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "Eleanor sounds like she made a good call." I did not know exactly what to do with that, which, at 847 years old, is a genuinely unusual experience. "Thank you," I said. She nodded once. Then she picked up the photograph and held it out to me, and I put it back on the shelf. We walked upstairs without saying anything else, and I made tea and she made more coffee. And neither of us mentioned Eleanor again. But something had shifted in the archive room in a way that the rest of the evening was quietly aware of even if we were not discussing it. The meeting location arrived the next morning. A message left in the east window, not burned, just written on plain paper, an old script. An address in the older part of the city, a building I recognized immediately, because I had watched it get built in 1887. "You know it," Mara said, reading my face. "I was at the opening," I said. She blinked. "Of the building," she said. "Yes," I said. She shook her head slightly in the way she did when my age produced a fact she needed a moment to actually absorb. I found that endearing, which was itself a dangerous thing to find. I noted it, set it aside, put my coat on. We left for the meeting at 9 in the evening. The building was a converted merchant hall in the old quarter. 4 stories, stone exterior, the kind that looks like it remembers things. Mara had her full kit under a coat that should not have been able to conceal as much as it did. I had stopped questioning her methods. Corvus was already inside when we arrived. He was standing near the far wall with 2 vampires I did not recognize by sight, but I recognized them by age, the particular weight of presence that very old things carry. Both were older than 5 centuries, minimum. One was a woman, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of stillness that meant she had been powerful long before power became a performance. The other was a man I would have placed at roughly 700 years. He had the look of someone who had been tired for a long time. "Was?" Corvus said. His eyes moved to Mara with what I was now identifying as his version of approval. "The 100 good." The silver-haired woman looked at Mara with open curiosity. "A human in this room," she said. "That is a first for me." "Interesting. Mara Kane," Mara said, addressing her directly with the tone she used when she was establishing exactly where the line was. The woman's expression moved into something that might have been a smile. "I am Sira," she said. "I wrote the first council charter." I looked at Sira. The first charter was over 600 years old. That made her older than anything I had been in a room with recently. "And I am Dale," said the tired-looking man. "I stopped attending council sessions approximately 200 years ago. It stopped being worth it." I looked at Corvus. "You brought me the 2 council founders who no longer believe in the council," I said. "Yes," he said simply. "That is either the most honest negotiation I have encountered in centuries," I said, "or the most elaborate trap ever constructed." "It is neither," Sira said, moving to the center of the room with the ease of someone who has owned every room she has ever entered. "It is a conversation that is approximately 200 years overdue," she said. "Sit down, Voss. All of you. This will take time." We sat. Mara positioned herself where she could see every entry point in the room without appearing to. I noticed. Corvus noticed too. He looked at her with that expression again. Then at me. Something moved in his ancient face. He filed it away and said nothing. "The document you wrote," Sira said, looking at me across the table. "We have all read it, multiple times over the centuries. It was not wrong," Dale said, the tired quality in his voice carrying the weight of someone who had watched wrongness accumulate for centuries. "The council has drifted," Sira said. "What began as a structure for preventing catastrophe has become a structure for preserving power. For elimination teams," I said, "sent after one vampire who files his taxes and does not kill people. That is what it has become." Sira held my gaze. "Yes," she said, "that is precisely what it has become. And it is not what any of us built it to be." Mara had not spoken. She was watching the room the way she always watched rooms. But I could feel her listening to every word. "What do you want from me specifically?" I said. "The document," Corvus said. "We want to use it, officially, inside the council." I looked at him. "You want to submit a 200-year-old critical analysis of vampire governance to the governing body it criticizes. We want to use it to force a restructuring vote," Sira said. "We have the numbers, barely, but we have them. What we need is the author. You need me to present it," I said. Dale nodded. "In person, before the full council, which means walking into the council chamber, where for previous elimination teams were authorized," I said. "Yes," Corvus said. "That is the precise difficulty of the proposal." The room was quiet for a moment. Mara spoke then. One sentence, flat and direct and completely unambiguous in what it meant. "What guarantees does he have?" she said. Every head in the room turned toward her. She did not change her posture or her expression. "What formal guarantee exists that he walks in and walks back out?" she said. "Because without that, this conversation is not serious." Sira looked at Mara for a long moment. Then she looked at Corvus. Then she looked at me. "She is right," Sira said. "It is not serious without that. We can offer binding word," Dale said. "The old kind. Before the council made binding word ceremonial rather than actual." "What does binding word mean in practice?" Mara said. She was not accepting descriptions. She wanted specifics. She always wanted specifics. "It means that if any harm comes to Voss inside the council chamber," Corvus said, "the 3 of us forfeit our own standing permanently. And our standing," he said, "is the only reason this vote has any chance of succeeding. We have every reason to keep him intact." Mara looked at me. That look, the one that had been evolving for 12 days into something neither of us had named yet. I looked back at her. 8 centuries of careful decisions, and here was the one that felt like it weighed more than all of them combined. "When," I said, turning back to Corvus. 6 days, he said. "The next full council session. That is the window. After that it closes. 6 days. The contract had 21 days remaining. Mara's renegotiated terms covered whatever this had become. She had said so herself. I looked at the 3 oldest vampires in the room. Then I looked at Mara. She gave me nothing with her expression. "It was my call. I'll be there," I said. Corvus nodded. Sira's expression did something quiet and complicated. Dale let out a breath he had apparently been holding. The meeting ended. We walked out into the night air of the old quarter. Mara one stepped to my left in the way she always positioned herself. We walked for half a block before either of us said anything. The rain from 2 nights ago had left the cobblestones dark and reflective. "You decided fast," she said. I've been thinking about it for 200 years. I said. The deciding part was actually easy. She was quiet for another half block. The walking in their part, she said. That is the part that is not easy. No, I said. 6 days, she said. A lot can be prepared in 6 days, she said, if someone knows what they're doing. I looked at her. I have been doing this for a while, she said, looking straight ahead. 6 days is enough to make that room survivable. I walked beside her through the old quarter in the dark with the city moving quietly around us and thought about Eleanor in 1923. About every person I had kept at a careful distance for 8 centuries. Because the math of it was impossible and I knew it. About a woman who stood watch at my window so I could rest and put silver in my jacket pocket. Without being asked. Mara, I said. She kept walking. I know, she said. Just that. 2 words. I kept walking. The city moved around us, ordinary and continuous, and for the first time in 8 centuries. The math did not feel like the most important thing in the room. That was terrifying. It was also, in a way I was choosing not to examine too carefully just yet, the best thing I had felt in a very long time. The 6 days before the council session were the most deliberately lived 6 days I had experienced in approximately for centuries. Every morning started the same way. Mara at the kitchen table with coffee and a notepad, running through the day's preparation list. Every evening ended the same way. The 2 of us in the main hall going over contingencies until the city outside went quiet. She had a system for everything. Entry and exit routes from the council building mapped 3 different ways with 3 different backups. Signal protocols established in case we got separated inside. A word that meant abort and a word that meant hold and a word that meant now. She drilled me on the signals twice a day every day for 6 days until they were faster than thought. She did not apologize for the repetition. You survived for council elimination teams, she said on day 2 of preparation, not looking up from the notepad. I know, this is different, she said. Walking involuntarily is different from defending a position, you know. The psychology changes everything. She was right. I had been thinking about it since the meeting in the old quarter, and she had identified the exact problem in 1 sentence. Defending my estate, I was on ground I knew completely. Every shadow, every angle, every weakness in the stone and the wood and the glass. Walking into the council chamber meant walking into their ground, their shadows, their angles, their centuries of accumulated advantage. Tell me everything you know about the chamber itself, she said, pencil ready. So I told her every detail I had collected over centuries. The chamber was built in the 15th century in a city I would not name here because some information is still sensitive even now. It had been relocated 3 times since then as cities grew around it and secrecy required movement. The current location was underground. 3 entry points that I knew of, likely more that I did not. Stone walls were feet thick, no windows, 1 main floor, 2 levels of gallery above. The full council seated below, observers in the gallery. The speakers positioned at the center of the floor, elevated by exactly 3 steps. 3 steps, Mara said. That puts you above the seated level but below the gallery. Yes, I said. Exposed from both directions, she said. Yes, I said. She wrote something, underlined it twice. How many council members total? She said. 31 currently seated. I said. How many are aligned with Corvus and Sierra's faction? She said. 16, according to Corvus. Barely a majority. I said. Barely, she repeated. She wrote that down too. Looked at it. 15 members who want you dead and you're walking into their room to give a speech, she said. When you describe it that way. I said. I'm not describing it any particular way. She said. I'm describing it accurately. Fair enough. On day 3 she asked me something I had not expected. We were in the archive room going through the original document together. The document was handwritten. 47 pages in my own script from 2 centuries ago, preserved in a case that had survived for council raids. She had been reading it for an hour, sitting cross-legged on the floor with the pages spread around her, in the careful order she maintained. This is good, she said finally. Not with surprise, just as a clean assessment of what she was reading. You wrote this well. I had 2 centuries of observations to work with, I said, and apparently a lot of suppressed frustration, she said. I almost smiled. The argument in section 3, she said, tapping a page, about what vampire governance looked like before centralization. That's the core of it. Yes, I said. Everything after that is evidence supporting that one central point. She looked at the page for a moment longer. You need to lead with that in the chamber, she said. Not with the history, not with the evidence. Lead with what it looked like before. Make them remember, she said. The ones old enough to actually remember. Make them sit with that before you give them anything else. I looked at her across the spread of pages on the archive floor. You've been thinking about the speech, I said. Someone had to, she said. She picked up one of the pages and held it out to me. I took it. It was section 3. She had marked paragraphs in pencil lightly irascibly, as if she was not sure she had the right to mark them, but had done it anyway because it needed to be done, and she was there. I looked at the paragraphs she had marked. She was right. They were the ones. I looked up at her. She was already reading another page. "Thank you," I said. "Stop thanking me," she said. "You said that twice now and it keeps making things weird." I did not say it again, but I thought it. For what it was worth across 8 centuries of keeping thoughts like that at a careful and deliberate distance, Dafer brought an unexpected visitor. Not a scout, not a council operative, someone I had not seen in 60 years and had not missed. His name was Marcus. He arrived at the front door at noon, which was aggressive even by his standards, in a coat that cost more than most cars. Marcus was 300 years old, which in vampire terms made him young enough to still be impressed by his own existence. It showed. He was also, technically, my responsibility. I had turned him in 1887 during a period of my life I look back on with considerable regret. "You're going to get yourself killed," he said, pushing past me into the entry hall without waiting to be invited. Old habit. Terrible one. Mara was in the hallway. She looked at Marcus the way she looked at new variables that had entered her calculations without permission. "Who is this?" she said. "A mistake I made in 1887. I said. Marcus turned and looked at Mara with the particular expression of someone who has never been described that way before. "Marcus," he said to her. "I'm his." He paused. "We have a complicated relationship," he said. "He made me what I am." Mara looked at me. "You turned someone," she said. "Once," I said. "One time died in 1887. During a period I have since referred to as my lapse in judgment." Marcus put a hand to his chest. "A lapse in judgment," he said. "I am standing right here. I am aware," I said. Mara looked at Marcus for a moment longer with that cataloging look. Then she apparently decided he was not an immediate threat and moved on. 300 years old, she said to me. "Approximately," I said. "He doesn't act it," she said. "No," I said. "He really doesn't." Marcus dropped into a chair in the main hall and looked around at the defenses Mara had installed over the past 12 days with visible discomfort. "The council knows you're going to the session," he said. "Of course they do," I said. "Corvus told them." "That was the arrangement." "The arrangement," Marcus said. "Adrian, 15 council members want you in pieces. You're walking in there with a human and a speech." "The speech is very good," Mara said from the doorway. Marcus looked at her, then at me, then back at her. He was recalibrating something. "She read it," he said to me. "She improved it," I said. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You like her?" he said, very quietly. "She is professionally excellent," I said. He looked at me with 300 years of knowing exactly when I was being deliberately obtuse. "Adrian," he said, "I am telling you this because no one else is going to. Whatever this is," he gestured vaguely at the general situation. "Whatever is happening in this house in the past 12 days, he said. "Do not walk into that chamber and leave it unfinished." I looked at him. "That is remarkably sentimental advice from someone I describe as a lapse in judgment," I said. "You're welcome," he said. He stayed for an hour. He went over everything he knew about the current council chamber layout, which was more than I had expected him to know. He had been attending sessions as an observer for the past decade, which explained the knowledge and also suggested a level of political engagement I had not credited him with. When he left, Mara watched him go from the window. "He is more useful than you let on," she said. "Don't tell him that," I said. "He already knows," she said. She turned from the window. "He's going to be there." "At the session?" "In the gallery?" I looked at her. "You didn't arrange that," I said. "I mentioned it might be useful to have someone in the gallery who was already known to be there regularly," she said. "When did you talk to him?" I said. She picked up her coffee. "While you were making tea this morning," she said. "He has a phone." I stood in the middle of my own main hall and looked at Mark Hain, who had in 12 days quietly built a network around a problem I had been carrying alone for 2 centuries. I had nothing useful to say to that, so I went to make more tea. She went back to the notepad. The city moved outside. Day 4 ended. Day 5 was quiet in a way that felt like the world taking a breath. Mara spent most of it in the archive room alone. I did not interrupt. In the late afternoon, I found her asleep on the floor of the archive room with a journal from 1601 open across her chest. She had fallen asleep reading. The late light came through the high windows at an angle that made the room look like something from a painting. I stood in the doorway for a moment. 8 centuries, and I could count on one hand the number of times I had felt something like this. This specific quality of stillness. The feeling of a moment that is complete in itself and does not require anything added to it. I left her there, found a blanket, and set it over her without waking her, which required a level of care I was apparently still capable of. Then I went and sat in the kitchen in the quiet and thought about Marcus's advice and Eleanor in 1923 and 47 pages of handwritten argument. And I thought about 6 days that had felt more lived in than the previous 6 decades combined. That was not a comfortable thought. It was true anyway. She woke up an hour later and came into the kitchen with the journal still in her hand and her hair slightly disordered from the archive floor. She looked at me across the kitchen, looked at the blanket she was still holding, looked back at me, said nothing. I said nothing. She put the kettle on. That was new. She had never made the tea before. I watched her do it with a particular focus of someone filing something permanent. She set a cup in front of me, sat down across the table. Tomorrow, she said. Yes, I said. She wrapped both hands around her own cup. I need you to understand something before we walk in there, she said. Her voice was different from its usual register, more direct even than normal. What? I said. She looked at her cup for a moment, then up at me. This contract ends in 9 days, she said. Yes, I said. After tomorrow, assuming everything goes the way Corvus says it will, the immediate threat to you changes significantly, she said. Yes, I said. She held my gaze. Which means you don't need a hunter station in your east room anymore, she said. No, I said. So I need to know, she said, before tomorrow, whether you want me to leave when the contract ends or whether you want me to stay. The kitchen was completely quiet. The city outside was doing its early evening thing, indifferent and continuous and ordinary. I looked at Marcane across the kitchen table. 12 days ago she had a silver blade at my throat in this exact room. 12 days, 8 centuries. 47 pages of argument I had been carrying alone, a blanket on an archive floor, silver in a jacket pocket. I have been alive for 847 years, I said. In that time, I had become very good at knowing when something matters. Stay, I said. She looked at me, that direct look that had stopped being intimidating somewhere around day 4 and become the thing I looked for in a room. She nodded once, then she drank her tea. I drank mine. Outside, the city moved through its evening. Inside, the kitchen was warm and quiet. And that was that, the most important conversation of 8 centuries, and it lasted 40 seconds. Marcane's efficiency extended to everything. The morning of the council session arrived gray and cold with a particular quality of light that a city produces when it knows something is about to happen. We did not talk much over breakfast. We had said what needed to be said and prepared what could be prepared, and the rest was the day itself. Mara wore the coat, the one that concealed the things it should not have been able to conceal. She looked like someone walking to an ordinary meeting. That was the point. She had told me on day 2 that the most dangerous thing you could bring into a hostile room was the appearance of being harmless. You know that from experience, I had said. I know that from being a woman in rooms full of things that assumed I was harmless, she had said. I wore the dark coat, the document in an interior pocket against my chest. 47 pages of 2 centuries of careful and honest thought. We took the route she had mapped. The one that put us at the council building's secondary entrance at the arranged time with 3 backup options still available. The building was in the old financial district. Street level, it looked like an unremarkable converted warehouse. Most dangerous things looked like something else. Marcus was already inside. We had confirmed that through the signal system Mara had established with him during the day for phone call I had not known about. The secondary entrance took us down to flights of stairs into the kind of underground space that cities accumulate over centuries without acknowledging. Stone low light, the particular smell of a place that has been occupied continuously by very old things for a very long time. Corvus met us at the bottom of the stairs. He looked at Mara once, then at me. The full council is seated, he said. All 31, including the 15 who want him dead, Mara said. Including those, Corvus said. Their word has been given as agreed. It will hold. It will hold because if it doesn't, you and Syrah and Dale lose everything, Mara said. And you need this vote more than they need a target. Corvus looked at her for a moment with those ancient eyes that had seen 30 centuries of political maneuvering. Yes, he said. Exactly. She nodded once. Corvus turned and led us down the corridor toward the chamber entrance. Mara fell into step 1 pace behind my left shoulder, exactly where she always positioned herself, where she could see what I could not see and reach what I could not reach in the first second. 8 centuries, and I had never had anyone position themselves like that for me. I was aware of it the entire length of the corridor. The chamber doors were old wood reinforced with something that was not wood. They opened inward when Corvus put his hand to them. The sound of 31 vampires going completely silent when a door opens is a specific sound. Like pressure equalizing, like a held breath. I walked in. Mara 1 step behind my left, the document against my chest. 3 steps up to the speaker's position at the center of the floor. I counted the faces. 31. The 16 who were aligned with Corvus seated to the left of center, their body language studied and neutral. The 15 to the right, older than most things I had encountered, looking at me with a particular expression of people who had authorized my death for times. In the gallery above, I felt Marcus before I saw him. Steady. Present. Position where Mara had told him to be, which was directly above the speaker's position. I took the 3 steps up, stood at the center, looked at 31 faces that between them had accumulated something in the range of 12,000 years. The oldest among the 15, a vampire I knew by reputation and had never met, spoke first. His name was Aldrich. He was over 1,000 years old. Adrian Voss, he said. His voice carried the particular quality of someone who had been the most powerful thing in every room for 10 centuries. You are here because 3 members of this council have called for a restructuring vote, he said, and because they claim you are relevant to it. I am here, I said, because I was invited, and because a conversation that is the centuries overdue is still worth having. Aldrich looked at me with 1,000 years of absolute certainty about how rooms like this one were supposed to work. Speak then, he said. I took the document from my interior pocket, set it on the speaker's stand, did not open it. I knew it well enough. I had written it. I thought about what Mara had said in the archive room 4 days ago. Lead with what it looked like before. Make them remember. I am 847 years old, I said, which means there are members of this council I remember from before they were members. Before this chamber existed, I said. Before the charter. Before the robes and the seals and the elimination protocols. Silence. I remember what we were before we decided we needed a government, I said. Some of you in this room remember it too. I looked at Syrah, seated to the left. She was very still, the kind of still that meant she was listening with everything she had. We survived for centuries without centralized authority, I said. Not perfectly, not without conflict, but we survived, and we did not become this. The word this landed in the chamber and sat there. Aldrich's expression did not change. Several of the 15 shifted slightly. This chamber has authorized the deaths of 43 vampires in the past century, I said. For political disagreement, for nonconformity, for filing taxes, I said. 3 seconds of silence. Then something moved through the left side of the chamber. Small. Collective. Real. The document I wrote 200 years ago, I said, does not argue for the end of vampire governance. I want to be clear about that. It argues for the end of this version of it, I said. The version that sends teams of 6 to silence 1 vampire with a research paper. Aldrich leaned forward. You speak of governance as if you have participated in it, he said. You have spent for centuries in deliberate absence. I have spent for centuries watching, I said. Sometimes absence is the clearest vantage point available. The left side moved again. The restructuring proposal, I said, is simple. A council of accountability, external to this body, with actual authority to review elimination orders. Representation for vampires living outside the governance framework, I said, which currently numbers in the thousands and is growing. And a formal process for political disagreement, I said, that does not end with a burned seal on someone's window frame at 3 in the morning. The chamber was quiet in the particular way of a room that is deciding something. I had been in enough rooms to recognize the quality of that silence. Aldrich looked at the document on the stand. You would have us dismantle centuries of structure, he said, on the argument of 1 absence. I would have you examine it, I said. There is a difference between dismantling and examining. This council appears to have forgotten the distinction. Something happened in Aldrich's face, subtle. The kind of movement that 1,000 years produces in expressions that have become very controlled. You are not wrong, he said quietly. So quietly that several in the gallery leaned forward to confirm what they had heard. The chamber absorbed that. The 15 shifted again. Not all of them, but enough. Enough that the math Corvus had described as barely enough became something steadier. Syrah spoke then. I call the restructuring vote, she said, as is my right as founding signatory of the original charter. Clean. Formal. Exact. Dale seconded it, his tired voice carrying more weight in that moment than anything else in the room. Seconded, he said. Just that. The vote process in a vampire council session is not quick. It is deliberate and ceremonial in the way that very old institutions make everything deliberate and ceremonial. Each member speaks their position in order of seniority, which meant Aldrich spoke first, as the oldest member of the 15. He looked at me while the room waited, 1,000 years of looking at things with the certainty of power. Then he looked at the document. Reform, he said. Not dissolution, reform. It was not the full vote Corvus had hoped for, but it was Aldrich, and Aldrich speaking that word changed what came after. 12 of the remaining 14 followed him. 2 voted against, which meant the final count was 29 in favor of the restructuring process. 2 opposed, 29 to 2. Corvus, seated at the edge of the left section, let out a breath I could hear from the speaker's position. Barely, but I heard it. Syrah stood. The vote is recorded, she said. The restructuring committee will be formed within 30 days. Her voice was completely steady. Adrian Voss, she continued, looking at me directly. The elimination order against you is hereby suspended pending the committee's establishment. Suspended, not rescinded. Suspended. I noted the distinction. So did Mara. I was certain, from her position one step behind my left shoulder. The two opposing votes, she said, looking at the two members who had voted against. Their objections are noted and will be addressed in committee. The chamber session ended with the formal protocols that centuries of ceremony had made elaborate and slow. I stood through all of it. When the doors opened again and we walked back into the corridor, Corvus was 3 steps behind us, and Mara was exactly where she had been. In the corridor, she turned to me, ran the visual check, looking for damage. Finding none, something in her face shifted in a direction I had learned to recognize. Suspended, she said, not rescinded. I said. Noted, she said. She was already thinking about what suspended rather than rescinded meant in practice. Aldrich, she said. The 1,000-year-old one. His vote changed everything. Yes, I said. I did not expect that. I said honestly. I did, she said. I looked at her. How? I said. She looked at me with that direct look. He's been in that room for 1,000 years, she said. He's watched it become what you described, she said. Someone just had to say it out loud in a room where he couldn't avoid hearing it. You knew he would vote for reform, I said. I thought it was probable, she said. Based on what information? I said. She paused. I read the council records Marcus gave me, she said. Day 2. He had them on his phone. I asked him to send them. I stopped walking. You read the council records, I said, and you identified Aldrich as a probable reform vote. Yes, she said. Before the meeting, you knew the vote was more secure than Corvus told me it was, I said. She looked at me steadily. I thought it was worth knowing, she said. I looked at Marcane in the underground corridor outside the council chamber and understood something I should have understood earlier. She had not come to the council session as a hunter providing protection. She had come as someone who had done the political preparation I had not done. While I had been preparing to survive the room, she had been preparing for the vote to succeed. Those were two entirely different operations. You could have told me, I said. You were focused on surviving the room, she said. I didn't want to split your attention. Practical, devastating. Her. Marcus appeared at the end of the corridor. He looked at us, then at the expression on my face. Then he looked at Mara with new and genuine respect. She knew about Aldrich, I said to him. He looked at Mara. Did you tell him about the secondary failsafe too? He asked her. I looked at Mara. What secondary failsafe? I said. She and Marcus exchanged a look that contained an entire conversation I had not been part of. If the vote had failed, Marcus said carefully, and if the 15 had moved against you in the chamber, despite the binding word, there was a plan, Mara said simply flatly. The way she said everything that was actually important. Marcus was in position in the gallery, and I had a direct line to Corvus that would have triggered an immediate exit protocol, she said. 3 routes out, all pre-cleared. I stood in the corridor and looked at the two of them. 300 years of my mistake and 12 days of my hunter, standing together in a corridor, having apparently spent the past 4 days building a contingency operation around a council vote I had been approaching as a survival problem. When did you plan this? I said. Day 3, Marcus said. She called me. I looked at Mara. You called him on day 3, I said. I had questions about the council chamber layout, she said. He had answers. The rest followed logically. The rest, I said. It was a 3-hour call, Marcus said helpfully. Mara did not look even slightly apologetic about any of this. She never did. That was the thing. You were extraordinary, I said. I had not planned to say it. It arrived before I could select something more measured or appropriate. She looked at me. The corridor was quiet around us. Marcus suddenly discovered something very interesting to look at on the stone wall to his left. You're not bad yourself, she said. For someone who files taxes in 7 languages and collects 60 bottles of hot sauce. 63, I said. I ordered one while you were asleep in the archive room on day 5. She stared at me. You ordered hot sauce, she said, from a small producer in Oaxaca. I said. It arrived on day 6. It's excellent. She stared at me for another second. Then she laughed. Not the almost laugh. Not the sound that was close to a laugh. An actual laugh. In a corridor outside the Vampire Council chamber. The sound of it hit me somewhere in the vicinity of 8 centuries of carefully maintained distance and did significant structural damage. Marcus was smiling at the wall. He had the decency not to turn around. 300 years old, and occasionally he produced the right instinct. We walked out of the building into the early evening. The city was doing its ordinary thing around us, indifferent and continuous and real. The immediate threat was suspended, not gone. Suspended. The restructuring process would take months and the 2 opposing votes were not finished. Aldrich's reform vote was significant, but it was the beginning of a process, not the end of one. I had been in enough centuries to know the difference. The contract had 9 days remaining. Mara had said she would stay. That was also not finished. It was also a beginning. I knew the difference there too. We walked back through the old quarter toward the estate. The same cobblestones from 3 days ago, still dark from the rain. The 2 opposing votes, Mara said, after half a block of quiet. They'll move against you outside the chamber, she said. Yes, I said. The suspension gives them less cover than the elimination order did. But people with that much invested don't stop moving, she said. No, I said. They don't. She was quiet for another half block. So the threat changes, she said. But it doesn't end. No, I said. Good, she said. I looked at her. She looked straight ahead. Good, I said. I'm better at active threats than waiting, she said. The past 12 days have been the most professionally interesting 12 days I've had in 4 years of doing this work, she said. 4 years, I said. How long have you been hunting? I said. Since I was 22, she said. I'm 29 now. I did not do the math out loud. She glanced at me sideways. Don't, she said. I'm not, I said. You were, she said. The math, she said. It's not the most important thing in the room, I said. She stopped walking. I stopped walking. We were on the cobblestones in the old quarter with the evening moving around us and the city indifferent and continuous. She looked at me. You said that to yourself on day 1, she said. When I looked at the almost smile, you said the math wasn't the most important thing. You heard that, I said. I hear everything, she said. I thought I said it internally. I said. You said it quietly, she said. You need to work on that, she said. 8 centuries of living alone, I said. Things occasionally become external without authorization. She looked at me in the evening light on the cobblestones with an expression that was not the hunter look or the calculating look or the almost smile. Something that had not had a name for the first 12 days and was beginning to. I'm going to need a longer contract, she said. I was going to suggest the same thing, I said. I'll need to review the terms, she said. Reasonable, I said. Full disclosure, obviously, she said. Obviously, I said. No more cats, she said. I looked at her. The scout, she said. On day 5, you said it was a cat. I said. No more cats, she said firmly. Agreed, I said. And I want access to the full archive, she said. You already have it, I said. I fell asleep in it on day 5, she said. I know, I said. She looked at me. You put a blanket on me, she said. Yes, I said. Without waking me up, she said. You needed the rest, I said. She held my gaze for a moment. Then she nodded once. Okay, she said. Just the one word. But in the way she said it, the word meant something considerably more than its dictionary definition. We walked the rest of the way back to the estate in the kind of quiet that is not silence. The kind that has something in it, something real, inside. The estate was warm. The defenses Mara had built were still in place. The archive was still sealed. The kitchen table still had the map on it. I made tea. She made coffee. We sat across the map and went over what the next phase of the council's situation would require from both of us. Professional, practical, her pencil moving across the margin of the map in that small, precise handwriting that I had, memorized without trying, and under all of it, quiet and solid and not requiring any examination right now. The thing that had been building for 12 days in a house full of old documents and hot sauce, and silver filament and tea. Not the math, not the centuries. Not the careful distance I had maintained since Eleanor in 1923, because the math of it was impossible and I had known it. Something simpler than all of that. Something that 847 years of living had not made me too old to recognize. When it arrived, Mara looked up from the map. You're doing the thing again, she said. What thing? I said. The thing where you think loudly. She said. I'll work on it, I said. She held my gaze for 1 second, then went back to the map. I went back to my tea. The estate settled around us. Outside, the city moved through its evening. The council was restructuring. The threat was suspended, but not finished. The contract was being renegotiated. 847 years. And the best 12 days of all of them had just ended. And the next 12 were already beginning. I drank my tea. She made notes. Marcus texted something that was probably smug. I did not read it until morning. Some things could wait. This, right now, in the kitchen. With the map and the coffee and the pencil and the quiet, this could not wait and did not need to. It was already here. I was paying attention. For the first time in a very long time, I was paying full and complete attention. And that, as it turned out, was enough.